Well, cool. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for joining me. And
Yeah.
What I really wanted to talk to you about, I guess, is I watched your video. I can't remember the gentleman's name you were with, but y'all talked about like spending too much on
Mm-hmm.
shaving gear,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched it pretty extensively. And I mean, he. I don't want to say he almost lost his marriage, but
He did.
it hurt his marriage,
That's
and he
accurate.
was
Yeah.
hiding from his wife and whatnot. And y'all talked about ways to prevent that from happening, but I kind of maybe wanted to get into the why. And it's for me at least, a lot of it is envy.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
see
yeah.
these
Most
guys
definitely.
out here, there's brushes out there that are like $400, $500. There's I guess there's razors, like I just saw recently somebody picked up a Gillette toggle. I think those go for $200 or $300 or whatever.
Right.
I'm over here with like an $8 Omega brush
Right.
and a Gillette tech that I picked up
Mm-hmm.
for $12 on
Mm-hmm.
eBay, and I've never tried to be envious of, what everybody else has, but
Right.
it's hard. And like, so what have you seen? And it's been a while since I've watched that video
Mm-hmm.
between the two of you. Was that part of the reason that he kind of was, or just the thrill of just buying stuff?
Yeah, that's hard to untangle, if you will, for I think each individual. It's a topic that I got concerned about early on in the hobby because just for me personally, like moderation is not in my it's not in my makeup. Like
Same
I
here.
tend not, I tend like if I'm doing something, I'm like all in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's with no regard to a financial capability or the need to dedicate time to other things or what have you. Sometimes I just get so enthralled with something that I go all in, and
Right.
I've done that with other hobbies in the past, and so anyway, I started, and I'm a social worker by training, used to be the director of a community mental health center and was a therapist. And so I recognize patterns a little quicker, than maybe I used to. So there were things I was seeing in my own buying behavior in terms of wet shaving, where I was like, the red flags were going off for me, right? Like I was
Right.
thinking, wait a minute, like, why are you purchasing this? Right. And so, yeah, I think, I was part of and I'm still a member there, that I don't frequent there as much as I used to, of one of the wet shaving forums. And I can just, say that for me, it doesn't matter what you're doing. There's good and bad in terms of like pros and cons of using stuff. I get more benefit from just the dialogue on Instagram and YouTube and say Facebook than I do through the shaving forums, although I've met some great friends through shaving forums. That said, so early on, I decided to raise this issue of like overbuying, because for me, I wish there had have been something, and there may be, I just didn't know where to find it. But when I first got in the hobby, almost like, okay, here's the, my daughter and I joke about how the Imperials in Star Wars are the worst at having no handrails or no guardrails. Like
Right.
I wish that somebody who'd been like, okay, here are your guardrails in this hobby, right? Like here's
Right.
the blind spots or hot spots to watch for. And the whole time I know part of what I'm thinking is there's people who are pretty rational about this hobby and probably rational about most things and are able to control their spending. But I was wanting to raise the issue. And what was interesting, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit in that video you were talking about, but people just kind of, like, there were a lot of people that came out with their pitchforks, right? Like, don't dare talk about controlling spending or trying to be or being rational about your purchases.
And that's a red flag.
It is
Like,
totally.
yeah.
And I knew it was, I knew it was going to be a mixed response, but people joke a lot in this hobby. I don't know if you've heard this, or seen this thrown around, but people talk about being enabled. Ken, who I consider a friend over at Shave 326, he will even joke, like when he's showing, well, I don't know if he's joking, he's sort of being honest, but he may show like a razor, haven't have one standing here, and he'll be like, I was enabled to purchase this by such and such, like name a person that
Right.
sort of made him want that or whatever, right? And so they actually, at this forum I was in, they talked about they had a I don't know what they called it, like enablement operatives, like people who are really good at getting people, to purchase things to the point that they would joke about it. And there's something healthy about that as well, right? About like recognizing that goes on. But at the same time, I think it does become this groupthink kind of thing, to borrow a sociological term, where like everybody starts to think the same way, and to question the way of thinking, is sort of challenged. But what was interesting is people were messaging me behind the scenes, right? Well, I say behind the scenes, like just not on the forum, like in the direct messaging, and saying, hey, no, this is a serious issue that needs to be discussed. And, because for me, ultimately, what I was trying to say is this has the potential of destroying the very joy that you're experiencing from the hobby. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like where it takes on a life of its own, and you can't enjoy the hobby. Right. And I've talked to a few people. There's other YouTubers and other hobbies that I've reached out to talk to them about it a little bit. And like, there's this guy named SBRE Brown, who's into fountain pens, and this guy named Nick Shabazz, who's into pocket knives. And a lot of people tell me never get into the like wristwatch or coin collecting world, because those are apparently like a whole nother, like, problem. But this is an issue across, a lot of hobbies, obviously. And we're not picking up, we're not Jay Leno, we're not picking up Lamborghinis and, but nonetheless, unless, I think for the majority of people in the hobby, they're not independently wealthy, and there has to be, a reasonable, both financial limit, but also just, questioning your, I guess your relationship with the hobby and how healthy you are being about purchases. So yes, I think envy is a big part of it. You start to see things, and also what many people have called FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Like that you're missing out on something. And so the allure of this hobby for me, which I didn't expect on the front end, was this connection with other shavers, right? Like meeting friends, doing what you and I did, sharing samples with each other, that kind of thing. Like that's really cool, because I tend to work around mostly women, and it's just it's cool having other guy friends and stuff, so that's part of the allure for the hobby. But also just, the connection for me to, and I know I'm kind of getting to another topic here, but the connection to me with like, my dad, my granddad, like memories of things related to sort of the masculine journey, if you will. And so when I had that first experience, I think my gateway drug really was like essential oils. I'd gotten to those, and I'll talk about that on one of my videos. But then I picked up a bottle of Pinaud Clubman at I think off Amazon or something. And I was like, wait a minute. I just walked in to the barbershop I went to as a kid. Like, what just happened? You know what I mean? Like this scent thing was like blowing me away. And so, and then like I got Fines American, I could go through the whole journey. But my point is that I was blown away by those experiences so much, of like, wow, this is relaxing. Wow, this is incredible. Wow, it's like a time machine. I've even gotten to where in my shaves, like I have a Google, whatever, like like an Amazon Echo, but the Google, whatever it's called. I forget what the name of it is, but Google Home, I think it's called. But so I'll have it play like Sons of the Pioneers, which are like this, Western, well, being from Texas, you've probably heard of it before, or 40s music or whatever, just anything that's kind of nostalgic, makes you think of the past. But anyway, so yeah, there was part of me that was like, oh gosh, like, well, I wonder what, and here's the dangerous term to me, like, what's the best soap, or what's the best razor, or what's the best this, that, or the other, right? And so I guess people could look, they look at it at one point of like, I'm trying to find the best performance out of something, whether it be a soap base or whatever. Or I'm trying to find, this is big in the frag community, which I've also have dipped my toe in some in the past, the fragrance community, men's fragrance, is it your signature scent, or like the scent that's like your scent or whatever. And goodness gracious, but like if you just let's just take the number of, it's a horrible term, but I've adopted it, wet tubers, the number of people that are making YouTube videos about it.
Right.
And you divide it by the number of soaps. I mean, there's enough soaps for everybody to have like 2 signature scents.
Right. Right.
So anyway, I think there's a lot of things that go into it. And, but for me, it's like you could, start to say, okay, well, this soap that's coming out, it's got some notes in it I know I like, and wow, I wonder if it's going to be even better than this other one, right?
Right.
And I've reached a point, at least in my journey, where I'm now selling some stuff, right? And that's one good thing about this is if you have, when people do find themselves sort of, okay, wait a minute, my purchasing's gotten out of hand. The sets hold their value. In fact, some of them almost go up in value because they become
if they're not in production anymore.
Right. They become unobtainium and people want them, right? And so I've started selling a little bit on the Murphy and McNeil marketplace, but also through some of the Facebook groups, and people snatch stuff up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
One, and I actually made a whole list of warning signs, but for me, one of the things was this paralysis of analysis. I had so many soap options that I would have to stop and go, oh, which one do I want to use today? Which is both, a luxury, and that's awesome to be able to have that kind of choice. But at the same time, I was like, this should not be a thing that takes up time in my life. Me picking out which soap to use. But yeah, no, I think envy and YouTube and the forums and Facebook and Instagram, kind of like the shave of the day by itself, like the shave of the day photo, the SOTD photos themselves certainly feed into that. Whether it's aesthetics, like you see the way a brush looks or a razor looks, or even a soap label, for goodness sakes, right? I never thought that labels or packaging would be of interest to me. I mean, yes, in buying like an iPhone or whatever, but now it's just unbelievable. One of the reasons I love PAA stuff is their labeling, but yeah, so it could be like aesthetics that you see and you're like, oh gosh, I'd love to have that speaks to me, like that, particular design or whatever, or those scents, sound amazing. But, one of the things I've had to remind myself is that a lot of the long-standing YouTubers that have been in this for a while, they're getting stuff sent to them from artisans to try out, which, by the way, is both a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing in that here's a free soap that's coming your direction, but at the same time, you have this obligation to use it. And then no matter how unbiased you try to be, I think that there's no doubt that there creeps in this idea of, that you're still not wanting to be totally crappy. Yeah. To somebody who's given you a soap. I mean, I think, that like Chris, I am CDB. I think he's pretty good at it. He doesn't appear to pull any punches on anybody. He doesn't care who it is, but that's only really happened to me twice now. I think that I've been sent, soaps, and, while I've been appreciative, at the same time, it's kind of a weird spot to be in, but a nice problem to have. But I say all that to say that it's real easy for us to sit back and look at, you could watch Chris's channel, for example, for 4 months and never seen the same soap. Right. And the guy shaves every day, which I don't, for 2 reasons. One, my skin just won't tolerate an everyday shave. But 2, there's some days I just don't, and I don't have a job where I have to be clean shaven every morning. Right. But yeah, Chris has got, and so back to this forum, and then I want to hear your thoughts on the whole envy thing, but this forum post I made. So I actually, there were 3 forum owners. It kind of makes me think about the Time Variance Authority and the current Loki series, like the 3 heads of the TVA. But anyway, there was the 3 owners. And so I was talking to one of them and he was like, I've got 660 soaps. Wow. And I was like, are you being figurative, or do you mean you literally have 600, plus? He's like, no, I got 600 plus soaps. I was just thinking, dude, hey, I don't know where to put all those soaps. Right. Which is another sign of okay, this might be an issue if you don't have room for the soaps, if you're putting some in a storage, if you have a storage facility for for your shave soaps, there might be a problem. But and that guy might have the money and the whatever, the storage and all that to do that. That's fine. But I just thought to myself, well, where will be the stopping point for me from where I am now to where this guy is with like 660 tubs of soaps, right?
Right.
So anyway, it's all relative. It's easy to compare yourself to other, addicts, if you will, and be like, okay, well, I'm not as bad as that guy. But no, I think envy and for me, that fear of missing out is huge, because I was so hooked by that first experience, right? But they say this about like drug addiction, even the drugs that are legal and that we all use and it's socially acceptable, like caffeine. Like, sometimes those nothing's ever going to be as good as that first experience. You know what I'm saying? Like you're always chasing like that newness, but I just remember the first time I used American Blend, like the fine American Blend, the soap, the splash, and the balm. And afterwards was like this euphoric, like, spiritual experience. I was like, wow. Like and this is going to sound totally corny, but it's like, I feel and smell like the man I want to be. I know it sounds crazy.
No,
but you know what I mean? It's like, this is like the how I looked at my grandfather when he was, still with us, like this distinguished dude that sort of had his stuff together, that was ready to go in the day, fresh, ready to handle what was coming at him. And it just made me feel connected to sort of that idea or that feeling, And so I think, that in a lot of ways, we're always chasing that sort of first experience, but envy's huge. Envy and fear of missing out is big in a lot of stuff, but I think it's magnified in this hobby.
Which I think is interesting, because whether it's two things, the fear of missing out or envy, or having so many choices, you don't really, you get distracted, you have so many choices. Did your father or your grandfather ever have that problem?
No.
They had maybe 2 cents, but probably only one. They had either Old Spice or Clubman. That was about it, and we're so unique because we now have a problem that the previous generations did not. My grandfather, not a wealthy man by any means. And I don't have his razor. I don't really know where it's at. I think my dad might have it, but he doesn't exactly know. He had one razor, and he had one Gillette twist to open, and then he had disposable. He got into the cartridge razors, towards the end. They were in the 70s and 80s. But Old Spice, he used Old Spice, and that was it.
Right.
He had a mug. I don't know where the mug is either. Again, I wish I had, gotten into this hobby, because he passed away in the early 90s. I was pretty young. And then I don't know what all that stuff, I don't know whatever really happened to that stuff, And then his wife, my grandmother, she passed away, a while back as well. And, but Old Spice, he smelled like Old Spice, and that was it. And I do remember him he had a mug and he had a brush, and he would lather. I don't know what soap it was, but I do know his aftershave was definitely Old Spice. And then my dad was British Sterling. Now my dad used an electric razor mostly. He would use an electric razor. I remember sitting, he's still around and we talk all the time. But he would sit in the lazy boy, he'd watch television, and he'd use that electric razor. And then he'd finish, when he hit a commercial break, he'd get up and he'd go to the bathroom and he would put on British Sterling aftershave. And he doesn't use it anymore because they changed formula. I think they sold to a different brand or whatever, but he's written off. I don't even know what he uses now. I got him a couple for Christmas, I believe. I got him 3 bottles. I got him some Noble Otter, some Hub City Soap Company, and I got him some Clubman. I don't think he had ever used Clubman because that's not what his dad used. And and he lives in Texas, and we don't really talk. He was very appreciative of everything I got him, but I don't know how often he uses it or what, or I don't know. I don't know. We don't really talk about it. And he taught me how to shave. With a cartridge, like a Bic, like one of the super cheap ones, But then once I kind of knew how to do it with like a can of shaving cream, and then aftershave wise, I probably used just, Skin Bracer or some cheap, something or other. Then he just kind of was like, okay, you're good, and that's fine. To him, shaving has never been a big deal. But yeah, he never had to make the choices that we have to make.
Yeah, that's what that's one of the things that strikes me is kind of funny about it is that you can with all this talk of like reconnecting to previous generations and stuff, and, you can even think of like, oh gosh, I wish my granddad could see me using this, this razor or whatever.
Right.
And like these soaps, and and I'm talking about my grandpa, my mom's, I'm sorry, on my dad's side now, he would be like, what's your problem? Like, why do you have more than one razor? Right. Like, why
he wouldn't care.
Where are you getting this money to buy? Yeah, exactly. He
fought in World War II. The last thing he
right.
cares about is using a special razor or whatever.
Not, it's in some ways, it's definitely a first world, problem, and certainly a problem of affluence, of where we even have the discretionary income to, do this kind of thing. But yeah, for me, I think probably both of, like, my grandpa on my dad's side died when I was really young. But what's interesting is, I was like 3, but I remember what his bathroom smelled like. And I didn't really know what it was, but I do today. It was tobacco. Like, it smelled like I'd never smelled that smell before or since, you know what I mean? Like, it was tobacco, which a lot of people hate. And when I first smelled it, I was like, oh, I don't know about this, but then it started to grow on me. And for my granddad on my mom's side, he too eventually went to an electric razor and used that, and I tried it because I was looking up to him. I was like, and it was just like, the irritation was ridiculous for me. I couldn't.
I've used an electric. You have to, your face has to adjust, and it takes sometimes weeks and even months, but yeah, it'll tear your face up the first time you use it, for sure.
It's rough. And he used Skin Bracer, which I actually to this day love.
Yeah.
Now in high school, college, until I discovered this, and there was a time where I had a full beard and stuff, but until this, I used, like a Gillette Mach, whatever, with whatever 7 or 8 or ever how many blades are in there now.
Same here,
a can of goo, like gel. But I remember, and it was like Edge gel. But then I remember when I ran across like the Aveeno oatmeal stuff, I really thought I was doing something then using it. But it used to just make me so angry to go buy the cartridges because of how expensive they were, right?
Yeah.
And I would stretch them way past their prime in terms of
same here,
getting tuggy and stuff, because it just irked me, and I believed that I drank the Kool-Aid and believed the lie of, oh, this is a cheaper way to, and it is if you own one razor and right. But yeah, that, I think you're right. I think our, previous generations would kind of just shake their head at us like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing?
And then the other thing you mentioned, like the guy that had over 600 soaps, a scenario that I kind of play out in my head is, okay, let's say I won the lottery and I had millions of dollars and money wasn't an issue anymore. Even if I bought 5 soaps every single day, and every single day I opened my mailbox and it was just full of soaps, it's like you only have one life. The average person only lives about 25,000 days. So if you buy, 1,000 soaps, then you're only going to get to use each of them 20 times before you die. 25 times.
Yep.
So it's like, where does it end? Yeah. And it's like, so even if money, I have a wife and I have 2 kids, they absolutely come first. If they ever need anything, then shaving just absolutely gets put on hold,
Sure.
But it's like, if money wasn't an issue, there still has to be an end. Like,
yeah.
And I, you could think, oh, well, you can sell stuff like you've mentioned. I actually don't sell anything. I'm kind of like, I bought it, I'm going to keep it. Even if I never get to use it, completely, I use everything obviously once. But yeah, it's like, you can't buy everything, because there will eventually get to a point that you're not using the stuff that you have. So I look at it that way, and it's like, so I kind of I scale it down. I'm like, okay, I live within my means. So it's almost like money isn't an issue.
Right.
But there still has to be a point that you have to say, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a couple of thoughts there. One, I have, so most of the alcohol based
splashes
pretty much don't go bad because the scent's preserved in alcohol. Like, it'll be there. That it may, morph a little bit, over time, but it's not ever going to smell rancid or anything like that.
Right.
The essential oils are a little more prone to that than, say, like fragrance oils, but and I've never had a soap yet go like any kind of, and I've only been doing this for, I guess, 2.5 years now. So, maybe, but something I have noticed that will change on you. And this is one of my favorite products in wet shaving, but Sterling makes this Witch Hazel Aloe Splash, which I love. Like, I love, and The majority of those that they have are scented with essential oil. So there's like a lemon one, a vetiver, even some of the blends like bay rum and Texas on Fire, which I love. I don't know if you've smelled that scent.
You sent me some. Yeah, I've
I
used it.
love it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy. I'm like,
it's
this
polarizing.
Like
yeah. It's polarizing. I can see where the people wouldn't like it, but those I have noticed, like those particular scents I'm mentioning, in the soaps and in the splash, they don't change, but in the witch hazel, aloe, they start to get a little funky. Yeah. And so those, I would have to say that those have probably a shelf life of, 2 years max, maybe 18 months.
Yeah.
So, people need to keep in mind that some of what you can buy, and I noticed that when I had a beard too, in terms of beard oils and beard balms, some of them either lose their scent or they kind of get a little, funky. So, that's part of it. It's like you're throwing away, money on stuff if you're just going to have this, prolonged, stockpile. But, one of the strategies that I've tried to adopt, I'm not there yet, but I have to set a number. I did at one point on my brushes, and now I've exceeded that. But one of the things I've thought about with the whole soap thing is like, okay, here's the set number, right? Which sounds really, I don't know, rigid, or maybe even in another way to think about it, like sort of arbitrary, but like to say, okay, I'm going to have 30 soaps or whatever. Like that's the max. And so for me, at least, the selling of soaps is almost permission to bring one in to take its place, as long as I'm within a, reasonable thing. And the guy that I did the interview with, his name's David, and I see him all the time selling stuff on the wet shaveling. In fact, the forum itself, or the Facebook group itself, that a lot of people buy and sell on, is called the Wet Shaveling Enablers.
Oh yeah, I'm a member. I've actually never bought or sold anything, but I check it out all the time.
It's fun to look, at the buy, sell, and trade. And so he sells a lot of his stuff on there. I notice if he doesn't, like it. And Ken, Shave 326, he sells a lot of his stuff, right? And I mean, he sells, if he tells me, like, if I don't absolutely love it, I'm moving on, and that's the guy. Probably, it's not for me in terms of envy. Like, I look at like Chris, and these are guys I've talked to, outside of, just YouTube, but talk to individually. Like, Chris is getting the soaps from, artisans, and Ken's done that, some as well. But like, my biggest, like, I look at Ken and I'm like, well, first of all, I went to the wrong field. I should be like a nurse in the Army. Keep in mind, he's like a PhD nurse and worked at Walter Reed and whatever. But this guy, like, I've been joking with him. I was like, look, when you end your Badger brush, you like expedition that you're on, because he's like trying all the high end Badgers. Really? He started turning brushes himself and stuff. It was like, once you get through, like, could you please give me like the Cliff Notes guide, so I don't have to drop the money you have on, Badger brushes. But yeah. And then people that are in straight razors, like some of those Max Sprecher razors are, upwards of $1,000. And
right.
And then like sebum, while we're talking about Ken, sebum gold, like that, some of those sets from sebum, have you priced those at all? Looked at the prices on them?
Not really. I mean, I've seen that Creed, I mean, again, this would be a cologne, not so much, an aftershave, but right. $300-$400, for a bottle.
Yeah. And so some of the sebum sets are that for a soap and a splash.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm not talking about like anything, like it's that expensive. And, there's some of the more expensive soaps, like the Martin de Condres, which are really hard soaps, and they'll you'll get your money out of those. But, and so those made me, like, even looking at those, and I still don't own one of those, but even looking at those, I was just like, wow, that's ridiculous. But yeah, some of the sebum stuff's really expensive, but people who, can afford it and want to own it, that's fine. But, as you said, like, it can be where it's not interfering with other parts of your life or whatever. But for me, ultimately, and I would think, I would think artisans would care about this as well, is you want a customer base that has some sustainability to it, right? In other words, they're in it for the long haul, and not just people who are going to like buy, and then just totally burn out. You know what I mean? Which is where I was kind of headed, right? Because I was, and to this day, when I still am trying to move stuff, and when I say move, I mean like sell, get rid of, get it out of here. There's part of me that looks at it and feels a great deal of guilt and shame of like, what is your problem? You know what I mean? Like, that you just have to sort of stop and go, and you're like, well, I'm getting rid of it. That's the important thing, is I realized that I went too far. But I try to, and I talk about some of these strategies in that video you're referencing, but, I try my best to not buy anything I have not first put my nose on. Like I try not to buy anything that there's certain scent profiles that are in my wheelhouse that always will catch my eye. And right now I've only done one, but I'm very interested in doing these, what I'm calling these high point shaves. There's these people called high pointers who go to the highest point in each state, like they try to hit all 50. So I did my first one, my first shave at Klingman's Dome. So some of the scents that come out that are geared towards geographic places and the scents around those geographic, locations really inspire. So I just blind bought Cades Cove, Monday of this previous week, because I live in Tennessee and Cades Cove is in Tennessee. But for the most part, I try not to buy anything that I have not first, smelled in a sample form. And that's one of the things that, making friends, but also like I was talking about the forum earlier, one thing that forum did do is they did a sample pass around box, which was amazing. It was like, one of these medium-sized priority mailboxes, right? And stuff full of samples. And when I got it, I was like, this is Christmas morning. Like, I don't even, and there was part of me at the same time I was smelling like, please don't like any of these. Please don't like any of these. You know what I mean? And there was like four that I liked, but it's a really inexpensive and healthy way to put your nose on a variety of samples. And so, even getting those started within a Facebook group or amongst friends or whatever is a good way to, try to do that. Also some people I think split tubs, so you go in with, 3 other guys and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy, and we'll go in, 4 ways on a tub or whatever. But I think envy and the fear of missing out is definitely, part of it. And I think that, and I hate to sound this, basic, but I think for me, a lot of it has been like chasing that original high of like this experience is amazing. Right. But for me, it was, and I'm going to just briefly talk about this. So I went through this experience where I was at an eye appointment, which I'm notorious for, like kicking dentist appointments and eye appointments down the road. Right. I'm like, they're just teeth and it's just your vision. Who cares? You know what I mean? Like, but anyway, so I'm at this vision appointment and I find myself getting emotional because and I can't figure out why, like, why am I getting emotional? And I was sort of allowing someone to sort of take care of me. Right. And so we talk about self-care all the time. Like, what's that mean? Eat right, that kind of thing, whatever. For some people, they use a term self-care to sort of be selfish and but this experience of actually taking time to shave and sort of shut the world out and do this sort of physical activity, which is interesting when it becomes sort of automatic, much like say showering does. I think it's a time where people can access a level of their consciousness. I know this sounds real like out there, but I don't know about you, but for me, there's certain things I do when my best ideas come to me about whatever, right, work or whatever. And on occasion, that's when I'm showering. Like I get this, because I think I'm doing something I always do. So
for me, it's mowing the yard. When I mow the yard, it's just, I have my brain's just running because I'm doing, I'm just pushing a mower and
precisely
then hit me. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's part of it, like one part of your brain's like, it's almost like the toddler part of your brain, if you will, is occupied because it's having to push the mower. So the other part's sort of free to sort of, do something. And so anyway, I think for what's interesting to me, this is a little bit another topic, but in watching these YouTube videos of guys shaving, guys will talk about stuff while they're shaving. I don't think they would talk about otherwise. Does this make sense? Like they just, they're not going to tell you about what's going on in their life, but they're sitting there and they have, 20 minutes of air to fill. Do you know what I mean? And so they start talking about stuff, but yeah, that whole experience of just like, wow, like this is and I hate to talk about it like some sort of psychedelic experience, but it's like a little, it can be a little time machine in that it reminds you of something in the past. And it blew my mind when I learned recently, when I was sort of reading more about the physiology of scent, how our sense of smell is the only one of the 5 senses that bypasses the parts of our brain that sort of regulates, things and jumps straight to the part of our brain that's affected by emotion. It just bypasses that whole, processing and goes straight to like the amygdala and this whole idea of like memory and emotion. So it goes straight to memory and emotion. So for me, that experience of using these products was that it was like, oh gosh, this makes me think of this time or that time or whatever. And also just taking time to do something very intentional, and having to do it slowly. I mean, now I can use a double-edged razor and not have to think about it. But when I first started, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to cut myself, and so yeah, I think, if I had to say, if somebody's starting out and they were like, okay, what would you say about, this topic? I would say, watch yourself, like set boundaries on it ahead of time. Like let yourself sort of know what your boundaries are going to be, because it can take on a life of its own, where that even if you, like you said, even if money's not an issue, or even if storage is not an issue, just at the point where it's like you're having the paralysis of analysis of what to use, or anything that's taking away from your joy. In other words, you own so many products that it's taken away from that initial experience, then you're going in the wrong direction. Right. Yeah. So.
Well, and there's something to be said about, like, say you have 50 brushes or whatever, a brush needs to be broken in. And if you have too many brushes, you're never going to get it broken in. I play the banjo and I play the guitar. I've got, I used to own quite a few guitars. I have one electric and one acoustic, and I have one banjo. You have to break in a musical instrument. You look at Willie Nelson, and he has a guitar that is so worn out, it has holes in it. The thing just looks like hell, but it plays amazing. Yeah, and if he owned 50 guitars, he wouldn't wear out a guitar and he wouldn't get it to play the way it does. So there is something behind owning. Stevie Ray Vaughan was one of my favorite guitars. He had one guitar and it was super worn out. And it's like, you have to get to know something and you have to use something. And with brushes especially, they get broken in. A razor, not so much. Soap, definitely not. And then blades, you toss them after a few. But the brush, like that, maybe for me is why I only own I own too many, but I probably have 15, 20 brushes. But my two bore brushes especially had to be really broken in. One is still not completely broken in, but I have one that is like amazing, but it's also like 8 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that razors, to some extent, particularly, certainly if you start to get into straights, which I've barely touched on, but I'm enjoying the Feather SS Kamasori Shavette. One, because I don't have to worry about getting it sharp, because those Artist Club razor blades are sharp. But that, that takes learning that technique. And I think that different razors, have, obviously different angles of attack that sort of work better. So I think that's true too. I think you do break in razors to some extent, in the sense that they break you in, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
You get comfortable with it. Like, I know that I can reach for my Merkur 43C, and it's my dumb reach. Like I could, I just know that that's going to give me a good shave, and I don't even have to worry about it. But it's taken me a while to get there. You know what I mean? Like to realize that that's my sort of go-to razor. But yeah, you're exactly right about brushes. Like, if people are not familiar, like, the natural bristle brushes take some break-in period, particularly the bores, in terms of the softness. And badgers as well, for the most part, but for them it's more the smell, the initial initial smell out of there. One of my hacks for that is I soak all my new natural bristle brushes, well, I say all of them, most of them, in a little hair conditioner, like a sort of neutral scented hair conditioner. Do that, soak it for a couple of days. It tends to soften it up and get some of the scent out. But yeah, I think that we all probably own things that we have that are worn in and well worn, and that's what makes them endearing to us, and we wouldn't trade them out for a newer version of that, and well, it's amazing that you mentioned two Texan guitarist. I wonder why that is.
Willie Nelson and Stevie Ray Vaughan.
If you ever, I don't know if you're familiar with the genre of YouTube video called ASMR, but there's a great video of a guy who's Willie's luthier, like sort of restringing trigger and getting trigger back into condition. It's pretty fun to watch, just the sounds of doing that. But that's an old, like, I could guitar geek out here, but that's an old like Spanish flamenco gut string, as they call it, guitar, made to be a nylon guitar, but but yeah, you're right. Like, and there's people, like mentioning guitars, there's people who go overboard with guitars. Some people who don't even play that well, who own like tons of electric guitars and tons
Yeah.
of, acoustics or whatever. So it's, it's true for a lot of hobbies, but
And that's not going to make you a better guitarist.
no,
What's going to make you a better guitarist is practice. Eddie Van Halen just died, gosh, a little over a year ago, around a year ago. I don't remember exactly, but I remember them saying that he had basically zero natural talent. Like when he started playing the guitar at a young age, he sucked. He had but he practiced, they always say 10,000 hours or something to become like he had a guitar in his hand every single day. And it was often for hours and hours and hours. And that's how he got good. And his, famous guitar was the red one. I don't know if it had a name, but it had the white lines on it, but yeah, same thing. It's like there is something to be said about having one of something and being really good at that one thing, and I see a lot of people out there that they have one razor and they're like, this is my razor. I use it. And I look at their shave of the day photos and that razor is in every single photo. It's like, I can see, I don't know. I like a novelty razor. I have some slants. PAA has a glow in the dark. It's El Fantasma. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, boom, I have to have a glow in the dark razor. Right. And so, I do have a few of these kind of novelty things, but then also like there's something to be said about having a razor that's not flashy, but it gives you a damn good shave,
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I'm at a point right now where I could let all of my razors go, but 3. I love my Rockwell 6S. I bought one of those in blue.
I say, as soon as the red comes back, I'm going to get it. You can get it's weird. You can get it in a kit, but you can't get it by itself. And I mean, I don't have any real desire to buy a brush but whatever.
No. Yeah.
I guess I could get the kit and then sell the other stuff for cheap.
That's true. Yeah. But it's, I had the 6C, which I still have. I'm about to ship it off to my brother. I'm going to gift it to my brother. Yeah. And I would be fine with that razor too. I just like the heft a little bit more of the 6S, and I'm a sucker for blue.
The blues,
yeah. So I could keep that razor because I think I would recommend, like, for someone starting out, like, pick up a 6C. I mean, there was all those recommendations for the Mercur 34C, for the Edwin Jagger DE89. Yeah. But for me, like, if I could go back in time, I would have bought a 6C and I'd have been fine because you're essentially getting 6 razors, because you got the different caps or the different plates to flip. So that's one I would keep. The other one is the Feather SS Kamasori. I love that thing. And then my Mercur 43C, which is just a 34C head, but it's got a heavier stainless steel sort of cigar shaped handle. It's a little heavier. And I love that. So those 3 razors, somebody could come take my other razors and I really wouldn't shed a tear. I wouldn't. Like I recently, and I'm about to record here very soon. I may do it after we get off just because I'm in front of the background, but I was tagged in that Magnificent 11, razors. And first, part of my thought, like, I almost wanted to just say to Chris, was like, well, like, how many people were we going to find with 11 razors, But anyway, but in doing putting that list together, there's a razor I let go of that I know I'm going to regret one of these days. And what it was a 1908 Gillette single ring. Get this, signature. So what Gillette did, like King C Gillette, is for top salesmen in the country, right? He would they would come off of the, meal or whatever, and he would actually sign, like, etch into it while the metal was still sort of malleable. Wow. His signature, right? Yeah. Well, a guy down the street from me is an antiquer, right? And so I told him, I said, hey, if you see any shaving stuff, let me know. And so he's like, hey, here's like 4 razors in here, $20 or whatever for all 4, Yeah. So I get them out and I'm going in through, and I know nothing about vintage Gillettes. I mean, I know what a red tip looks like, and the red and blue and the standard tip of the super speeds and the fat boys and the what's the other one called? I forget, slim twist. So there was a slim, and then there was another one in there. Anyway, I put it on this Gillette forum, and people are losing their mind. Right? They're like, this is but for me, like, I looked at, and I was like, and I started getting these offers, right, for like people wanting to buy the thing. And I just could not justify for my own family's, like, looking at our own, like, financial goals and stuff like that. I just couldn't justify keeping that razor because I knew I wouldn't shave with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't. In fact, I almost gifted it to another YouTuber who I know really was interested in it, but he ended up advising me on like how to best sell it and what price to get for it. But I sold it. And I did take videos. And so it'll be in my list of the Magnificent 11, but that's a razor I imagine one day I might regret, but I thought about it, and I really learned something from this antiquer that I think is important, because I was talking to him about this whole idea of, because he runs into people who have reached the end of their journey on the earth. And now he goes in and they've got all this stuff, this collection that he's, faced with selling or valuing for a family or whatever.
Yeah.
And so what he frequently does is he'll come across an item he really likes, and he'll keep it in his home for a couple of days and take pictures of it and tell friends to come look at it. And then he moves it on,
Yeah.
And my mom has got this philosophy too about, because my grandparents over in the last, 10 years, I've lost both my grandparents on that side. My other ones died several years ago, but my mom was really struggling with what personal things to keep of theirs. Right. And so she just started, now we live with, basically a digital camera in our pockets and our phones.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's like, look, I make a memory and I move on. I take a picture of it, and it's not worth the space it would take up in my, personal area. So, for some of these soaps and stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I get that genre now, or I understand what that's like, but that's just not, for me. Like for me, and I'm going to offend some people, but I'm not a huge citrus guy. Like I have my margaritas in the Arctic, and I like it a lot. Right. And because it's kind of unique, and I love the way citrus smells, but I just encounter it in everyday life. Right.
Right.
Like, what I'm saying? Like if I want citrus, I'll go get some orange juice or lemonade. I mean, that's just me. Right. At the same time, somebody like CDB, like he sort of makes fun of people who like dark scents. Right. Like, but for me, those dark scents take me to memories and things like that, right? Of different places. And so like a Bay rum that I think is really unique is Noble Otter's, what's it called? Is it called
Plunder?
Plunder. Yes. That's
Plunder.
it.
Yeah.
Yes. It's because it's got that like cannon smoke kind of with it, which I love that. Right. And I can see where some people wouldn't like that. So for me, it has to be something pretty unique. In fact, that's a video I thought about. Maybe it could be a topic for a future chat you and I could do, is trying to categorize, like, what are the genres of shaving soaps, because, you got the Bay rums and the barbershops and the, citruses and the whatevers, right? There's different things out there, but, I've even thought about that, maybe you find the one you like in that genre, but do you really need 4 Bay rums? Probably not.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I could think of 4 that I would want to have that I've encountered that I don't want to, because they're 4 different experiences. But so, yeah, I mean, it's really easy to, but I think what is an interesting question is talking to people who have, maybe not the guy with 600, but talking to the, CDBs and the Kens, and like, hey, what's it like on your end of, like, you have all this stuff, and, what's it been like for you or whatever. But yeah, I'm thankful that I at least realized when it was getting out of hand, right? That like, okay, wait a minute, slow down. Like, why are you, because, and again, this is for me personally, this is not for everybody, but this is something I would say that you watch for, because it was true for me, is I would be shopping. And this is what in addiction we would call ritual behavior, like ritualistic sort of behavior leading up to the usage of said substances or whatever, right? So, spending hours, like, looking on Maggards or whatever site, putting stuff in your cart and like, oh, should I get this? Should I not get this? Should I get this? And remembering hitting buy, and not the immediate feeling was not, oh, I'm excited, I'm getting this new stuff, right? It was, I'm relieved that the tension I was feeling of, do I buy this or not, had been lifted. All right. Now, some people are not going to get that at all. Like, they're not going to understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
But it was like, I was almost in a prison of my own making, of like, I'm being obsessive about what do I purchase. And then when I was at least released from that tension when I hit buy, and I was like,
it's done.
Yeah. And I was just like,
I'm the same way.
I was like, wait a minute. That's not, that's not healthy. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there was at least enough alarms in me to go off and go, okay, wait a minute, that's not cool, so to me, that's something to watch for. Is And obviously, that, like what I talked about with David in that video, if you're hiding stuff from your wife, and I've been guilty of that, if like a package comes in and like I quickly whisk it away to a remote location in the house to unpackage it or whatever.
Right.
So that, I think people have to just know what their non-negotiables are, like areas that they are not willing to cross. And
Yeah.
again, I realize there's completely sane, mature men who are in this hobby that this has never been an issue for them. But I do think the shave of the day photos, the Instagram, photos, the YouTube videos make it easy to fall into sort of that you're missing out on something. Like a new soap drops, and like every YouTuber is like,
Oh yeah.
there's 10 videos of this soap, and you're like, oh my gosh. And what people have to realize is that, probably half of those YouTubers had that soap sent to them, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them will turn it around. They'll flip it. They'll buy that soap and they'll turn it around and sell it and get another one. And
Yeah.
for a lot of those soaps that are limited drops, you can almost get exactly what you spend for it. But yeah, you just have to set those limits that you're not willing to cross. And when you do, that's time to for the alarm bells to go off. And because ultimately, what I would wish for anybody, because you kind of know my angle from watching my channel. So I really have a heart for men's mental health. And to me, this hobby, when handled well, can be a positive part of that equation of but being a relaxing self-care type of activity. But I don't want to see it reach a point where it's in the opposite direction. You see what I mean? And
Yeah.
so to me, I think that this hobby has incredible potential for that kind of activity. Because people don't understand unless they're in the hobby. But you sit back and listen to grown men describe what this hobby means to them. It's a phenomenon. Like I don't think there's anything like it personally. Maybe
Right.
the craft beers and one of my current addictions right now, craft coffee, getting into different coffee.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's everything's got that thing. But the personal nature of this daily routine that you're having to do, but doing it in a way that's enjoyable, I think it's a pretty unique sort of scenario. So I just don't want to see anybody lose their joy of this hobby once they get it. And there really should be some warning labels on when you first get into the hobby. And I won't mention I think he says it in the video, so anybody can go watch it. But David in that video calls one artisan's marketing aggressive marketing. And he's right. It almost is, but at some point you have to go, wait a minute, but I'm a consumer here. Is that like, it's so aggressive that I've lost my mind, you know what I mean? Like, and so,
Right.
so yeah, some of that stuff but there are certain artisans, like when they have something coming out, you're going to see it 15 times in a day, like just if you're on Instagram, and that's just their direct marketing and not even people using it. But
Right.
yeah, it's one of those things, I think, that and it's true of anything in life, the whole envy and fear of missing out, and not to get religious on anybody at all, but like to go back to sort of the if you're not religious, for people to regard it as wisdom literature. But if you go back to Genesis and the creation story, I mean, that's essentially the original sin was fear of missing out, right? Is like, God's like, you can't eat of, you can eat of all these trees. Like you have these 99 shaving soaps, but you can't have this one, right?
You're going to want that one.
Yeah. And Satan's like, wait a minute, God's holding out on you, So it essentially is that same thing. Is like, oh gosh, everybody's got this new, scent or whatever that sounds amazing. And I think basses are that way, like people, looking for best performing basses or whatever. But with rare exception, I have not had a bad shave using any of the products I've used since I've started. If it were razor, it was bad technique, or I didn't know how to lather a particular soap right or whatever. But you're going to get an enjoyable experience out of pretty much any of the products that are out there, unless you have like a fragrance reaction to it or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just decide what your boundaries are, and don't allow yourself to cross them, and maybe even find another shaving buddy to kind of hold each other accountable. Like, how you doing on the purchases or whatever.
Right.
And so yeah. And I just committed to myself, like, I'm not to make any purchases in the dark. In other words, like I
Right.
tell my wife everything I'm, thinking about buying or whatever. So, and some people like have a problem with they're like, oh, I don't care what my wife, well, whatever. You have a different marriage than I want to have. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
want it to be a partnership. So anyway, yeah, you just have to set those boundaries and not be willing to cross them from my perspective anyway.
Yeah. One thing I know that's with me, uh, it's been a while since I've used up a soap. I've got one that I'm very, very close to, but I always hear people like, "Oh, I'll never." And again, I could go 10 years probably and not run out of soap. But it's like when I first got into wet shaving, Parasso and Taylor of Old Bond Street, and then Colonel Comp. Those were the three, and they're fairly cheap. Tobbs could be, considered kind of expensive, but I remember the first Tobbs tub that I used up, and it was lavender. I really like the scent of lavender, and I completely used it up, and it's completely gone. I mean, I could go buy more. I'm not saying it's gone forever, but it's like I was like, man, I should have kept a little bit of it. Even if I didn't use that last little bit, I could always at least smell it and whatnot. And then Eaton College is also the second Tobbs, and that's the only two that I've ever bought, but it's also completely gone. So there is something to be said if you have enough soaps, you'll never use them all, and you could always go back and be like, oh yeah, and then you can use it again. But with those, I could always go back and buy them again. Probably won't, but it's just interesting that those are two that I remember that at least in my collection are completely gone, and I can't even open up a tub of it and smell what it smelled like.
Yeah, because if I recall, you've actually been interested in the hobby for a long time and kind of got away from it for a little while and then came back to it.
I was shocked. I didn't even realize you've only been doing it for a couple of years. It'll be 8 years this winter. Not my first job, my job that I had a while back, I never had to shave. I shaved once a week and it would grow out. And then I would use like an electric beard trimmer just to knock it all down. And then I would use like a Mach 3 or something. And I would use a can of foam, and that worked. And I would do that once a week. And also a blade lasts quite a while if you're only using it once a week. Basically, I used one cartridge razor a month, and it was cheap. But then I got a job where I did have to shave every single day. And then I got into the hobby to save money. And I did for quite a while. I had one razor and I had two soaps, and I used cheap drugstore aftershave. I would say for like 2 years or so, I saved a lot of money. And then I got into the Tobbs and stuff, and I got a few artisan soaps. And then I kind of got burned out. I don't know. It got back to the point I was just doing it every day. And it wasn't just shaving. It was just life in general. Like I was burned out in my job and stuff like that. And then I would say I was just I would buy Parasso online, and then I would buy like just Old Spice. And then I used just my same couple of razors. And then 2020 happened, and I'm home a lot and stuff. I'm on the internet a whole lot more. And then I found this resurgence, and I've gone into it way more than I did. So you can almost say it's really only been 2 years, at least as far as using artisan soaps and whatnot, because there was a good 6 years where I truly was doing it just to save money. And I did. But it wasn't as fun, So I don't know. I think the key is just moderation, no matter what.
It is everything. And like I said, unfortunately, it's hard for me to do. And so having people to sort of help you with that, you mentioned something there that, and I forget what term you used, but I was asking, I had all my soaps out at one point. I was taking some pictures. And so I sent Ken, Shave 326 a message and said, hey, you interested in samples in any of these? And one of them, he said, I'd like to have that one around just as a sniffer, meaning he knew he'd probably never purchased the puck, but he wanted to have the ability to like open it up, go, so yeah, that's I remember what that smelled like. You know what I mean? And I tell you what, like if for no other reason, like one of my favorite artisans is PAA because of those 99-cent fragrance samples. Like you could, like that would be, like anybody's like this new, I would say like go use their scent chart, order 10, 20 of those or whatever, you're not out that much. And then, plus you still have that sample sitting around that you can sort of sniff and know what it smells like. But yeah, I think that's a good point. People may want to think is like when they're reaching the bottom of a tub, maybe not use it all up, maybe keep keep a little there. I've thought about starting a series of videos called Show Me Your Bottoms, which is a horrible title, but intentionally, but I've got but I've got four that are almost there. Well, 3 that are, and that's for me. It's PAA's Sangre de Drago,
Yeah.
PAA's Atomic Age Bay Rum, and then Holy Cow's um, uh, blanket here, Fougere Bouquet and King of Oud. Those
Yeah.
are three that I can see the bottom of the tub because I like them so much. Like one of them I had early on, so it's just been used a lot.
Right.
But for the other three, I just use it so often that it's getting wore out. So yeah, that's and there'll be those tubs where I'm like, I probably won't replace this one when I get rid of it.
Right.
And honestly, that's, if I could say one more thing about this topic, would be that's my current litmus test, if you will, for do I keep something, is would I replace it? Yeah.
Right.
Would I replace it when it runs out? And if the answer is no, I can't really justify even keeping it now. Maybe I've shaved with it once. Yeah. And and if you look, there's tons of stuff for sale on wet shaving enablers that are the parenthetical expression is used once, because like some people will open the tub and just are done. But I would say this, I have learned this, and I'm sure you have, doing it longer than I have, but some soaps smell completely different lathered than they do off the tub. Yeah. And so I would say at least get you out of, dime size and lathered up, because some of them are completely different once they're.
Well, and I would say multiple times, like there's a couple of soaps that I bought that initially I was just kind of like, okay, that's not what I expected. Used it a couple of times, but then it kind of grew on me, and I would even say the second time you use something, it's going to be different because now you know what to expect. Yes. It's one thing to smell it in the tub, and like you said, it's going to smell different when you lather it up. But then to actually lather it up a second time, you already know what to expect. And you probably know this with mental health. What's the term for when you already have an idea of what something is going to be like versus, like I've always heard, like you walk into a room and the room is not set up the way you thought it was in your mind, and that's going to throw you off and whatnot. So same thing with a scent. If you have an idea, you smell it and you're like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. But then the second time you do know what to expect, it's going to smell different.
Yeah. Those response biases, sort of, preconceived notions of what things are going to be like. And when I mentioned tobacco earlier, when I first smelled it, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, some people say it smells like the inside of an old lady's purse. I don't know.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. I've never used it, but that's what I've heard.
So and I even used it a couple of times and I was like, I don't know. But then at one point there was something like the third or fourth time and it was like the heavens opened. I was like, it was just so strange, So, and I think our nose has changed too. And if we can also, I know this from fragrance, you can also go nose blind to stuff that used to smell great to you is not as great, anymore,
Right.
And there's some that I used to would have probably listed, as being one of my favorites that are just not. So, and another thing, and some people are not this far along, but there are other times when picking out the soap, it reminds me, I don't know if you've read or even familiar with You'd Have to Live Under a Rock to not have heard of it, but Marie Kondo's the magic joy of tidying, where she talks about.
I know of it.
Yeah. So she talks about like you pick up an item like this razor and you go, do I love it? Does it bring me joy? Right. And for some of my soaps, it would be like, oh, I'm going to use it. It's all right,
Right.
And really, I want soaps that, like, when I'm getting ready to use it, I'm like, oh yeah, like, I'm excited, like this, let's use this thing. So that to me is another indication is, just trying to keep stuff that you really, really enjoy. And when it runs out, buy another tub. I think one of the tragedies of owning too much is that I only get to use Fine American Blend 4 times a year instead of using it 4 times a month. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and I've also thought before about hyper focusing on one, especially, if you want to use it up and you don't plan on replacing it but then you're missing out on all the ones you do like to use.
Right.
It's complex.
That's
for sure.
Yeah. Again, our grandfathers are laughing at us.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He would run out and then be like, oh, I guess I should go to the store, and then just not shave for a couple of days. And
or worse yet, like, tell your grandmother, hey, while you're at the grocer, pick up something from the aisle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is interesting. We have a local, like a little small grocery store here. It's not a chain. There's just like 3 in the area and that's it. But they carry like I bought a Burma shave boar brush there the other day for $3. I haven't tried it yet. It may be horrible, but and they carry a lot of shaving stuff there. They carry double edged blades. They carry the Schick injector blades, and they carry gym style blades at this little grocery store. Like it's crazy. So I don't know if there's like old men in the area that have come in and like, you got any gym blade, but they carry all three types. Yeah.
I'll never forget the look on the girl. I was buying some Clubman, and the look on her face when she scanned it. I was at the grocery store, and she kind of had this funny. She even like looked at like, what is this? Like, and then she just kind of, I don't even know if she really read that it was aftershave or whatever, but she was confused. Like, what? I don't even know. There's a weird looking guy with a cane on it. Like, what is
Top
this?
hat,
Yeah. She definitely was a little bit confused. I didn't say it's aftershave, but I should
have. That stuff is a time machine in a bottle. Like, and like I said, when I first met, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the, barber. And I immediately bought a bottle for my dad. I'm like, Dad, this is the barber shop we went to or whatever.
Yeah.
And now if somebody came and got it, well, I wouldn't let anybody take it because I want to sniff it every now and then, but I'm not that excited about, like, I'll probably use it once a year and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So, taste change, but yeah, that stuff, and the cool thing about that, anybody that happens to watch this video don't know what we're talking about. Like, you can pretty much pick up Clubman Penard in any, like, Walgreens, some Walmarts have it stuff. You can find it. And I think it's underrated. I also personally think Skin Bracer is underrated. I think for what it is, it's a pretty good, and I really like Aqua Velva Musk as well. I'm a fan of it, but yeah. People will, anymore, I have to be careful who I share. Like, I have a YouTube channel about wet shaving. It's one of my hobbies, because they just look at you like you've grown a second head. Like, what?
Yeah. I've told some people that I work with, and they think it's really cool, especially the vintage stuff that, the vintage razors that I have. They're just like, well, that's, different and unique or whatever. But yeah, most people I know don't really know.
Yeah, it's something like you have to experience, I think, to appreciate. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And again, for me, it's just, I think that those warning label kind of things help people ensure that they can enjoy it for long term. Yeah.
Right. I always tell my wife, at least I don't buy guns.
I know. Yeah. I mean,
that's like such an expensive hobby. I do own a gun, but like, I don't collect them because, man, $500-$600 a pop for a cheap gun. So
yeah, I've been down the, fountain pen hole. I've been down the pocket knife hole. Like, I've been, I was into guns, for a while, and, it can happen with a lot of different things, but, it's like you said with, owning a bunch of guitars doesn't make you better. Like, I found that out with golf clubs. Like, I kept thinking that there was going to be a driver that was going to correct my slice. It never happened. And so eventually I just sold all my clubs and said, you know what? Yeah, just not worth it, not worth it. Other ways to get outside and have fun. But with shaving, I would say is that, you do get better with it, as you practice. There are some pieces of equipment that make shaving a little less, where you have to be as conscious about it, that are, but even with something like a double-edged razor, you can, if you don't know what you're doing, you can still cut yourself. Particularly if
I haven't used a shavette in a long time. I cut myself really bad with a shavette. Like, I even almost was thinking, do I need stitches? Like, it was right here under my right eye, and a pretty big cut. And I have not used a shavette since. And I do own one straight, like kind of a cheap straight that I bought on eBay. But I've never used it because, like, I bought it and, like, the day it came in the mail, or a couple of days even before it came in the mail, was the day that I cut myself with that. And a lot of people have heard, an actual straight is much more forgiving than a shavette, because just a broken blade, or like you said, one of the artisan blades, they're just insanely sharp. Yeah. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. And then I've kind of been like, well, okay, just focus maybe on double edge. Ken Surfs was he's the YouTuber that got me, like, to create my channel and whatnot. Right. And he only uses double edge. He doesn't use any shavettes or commissary or straights.
And that's the same. So that touches on the topic, this whole envy thing, because there's some guys who will straight razor shame you. Like, if you're not into straights, they'll be like, well, like, and that's true for everything. Like, people look down on your soap or your splash or whatever. But yeah, I had to give myself permission to not to like stop trying to use the straight razor, because everybody was like, oh, you got to stick it out 40 shaves. But again, for me, it was still in my joy. Like I wasn't enjoying my shaves.
Right.
And I was like, I want my joy back, you know?
Right.
And so for me, I think it is true. You can cut yourself quicker with a shavette because those are, you know, factory sharp blades.
Mhm.
But for me, I like using them better because the tough part for me for the straight was having to force it sometimes because it's not sharp enough. But yeah, with the shavettes, I've got a couple of memory lines where there'll be a scar, like there's, you probably can't see it on here, but there's a scar on my chin that'll be there forever.
Yeah.
And in my closet, you know, I have the styptic and all that stuff, but I also have a bottle of that liquid. It's a horrible name, but liquid skin. It's like, you know, liquid bandage stuff, just in case, you know, that like it just gets out of hand one day or whatever. But you know, and I, you know, occasionally it's also fickle. Sometimes you could be using at least for me, I can be using a double-edged razor that is relatively mild and has a mild blade in it, and then somehow end up cutting myself several times with the same shave. And you're like, I have no idea what I did differently.
Or you don't feel it, but then you look in the mirror and there's blood and you're like, I didn't feel that at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which you do when you put on the splash or the alum or whatever. But yeah, you know, we all owe a great debt of gratitude to those YouTubers, I think, that came before. And for me, it's Paul H. Like I used to watch Paul H while I was shaving. Like I would put his shaves on while I was shaving, not to like mimic or anything, but just because I would enjoy to listen to his conversation. And it was almost like I was shaving with a buddy, like, you know, hanging out, shaving with a buddy or whatever. And yeah, those guys, and the great thing is, you know, now all of us try to do stuff different from me, you know, trying to think of new ways to do different videos or whatever. And those guys are still doing the same thing and still getting the same
tried and true.
They're classic. Yeah, exactly. And that's what, you know, there's been times where I've tried to shorten my videos and I'm thinking, you know what? No, you know, Paul H shows stuff soup to nuts, like it, you know, whatever he's doing, and I enjoy it. So I think, you know, every YouTuber's got their place in different, you know, types of the videos, but yeah, and you know, that's a whole nother topic, is the whole sort of almost success envy of other YouTubers when you get into this, and you know, I've talked to some people who like wanted to just stop making videos, who would get really jealous of like the success of other YouTubers, or not understand why other YouTubers weren't giving them a shout out or whatever, you know. And my take on that is make content you want to watch and that you enjoy making. And if the views happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't. I know that's real flippant, but yeah, I think you just have to make content that you want to see out there. And maybe it's different than what other people are doing or whatever. And I know some people who make YouTube videos and they have like maybe 5 loyal subscribers, and they carry an ongoing conversation with those 5 people, and they see those 5 people as, you know, as friends, so yeah, you just have to. And look, my daughter has about 3 times the number of subscribers I have. And she has now, she's only 17 and she's had that since she was like 13. She was into that show called Once Upon a Time, which is like, you know, fairy tale set in more modern time. And there was a huge following around that. They had conventions and stuff, but you know, she made enough money over 4 years, basically 3 years, to buy herself a Nintendo Switch. So, you know, what, you know, $300. So all I'm saying is, you know, is unless you're, you know, nobody's about to quit their job. I mean, not, you know, CDB's got a day job, you know, Ken Surf has a day job. Kevy Shays, you know, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's getting rich off this thing. I think it is nice when you hit a level that you do have artisans reach out and said, hey, would you be interested in doing? And I've even been so bold. I contacted the guy at Pacific Shaving. I said, look, I'm seeing this cork handle brush. This thing looks amazing.
I've seen that.
Yeah. Would you be interested? And he was like, sure, I'll send it, you know, cause I'd done a video previously on one of his products and he liked it. So so I have asked, you know, before, and I've also been asking, people say no, you know, but it doesn't you know, hurt to, but I think I did have this delusion that, you know, you reached a certain level and then, you know, I don't know, you got all your stuff for free. It reminds me of the Dire Straits song about money for nothing, but you know, you just thought that, you know, at some point you just, all these, you know, soaps would come pouring in and you never have to buy another soap ever. And that might be, I don't know Chris's existence, but I think Chris buys most of his stuff, you know, like he buys most of it. And so for some of it, I know he even gets it and then will pay the artisan for it, even after he's gotten it. But
Yeah.
So I think that's true too, is that you have to also, if you're going to get into content creation, is just that you have to do it for your own enjoyment, and we on the mental health podcast the other day, we decided to start asking guests the question of what's your get your head right soap, because I have been able to regain or retain that joy of the hobby, because there's days where I'm kind of in a funk, right? And maybe I haven't shaved, and I think, what product, what soap could I go use? And I kind of afterwards, I know I'm going to feel like a little better, you know what I mean? And the hobby still does that for me. And there's certain scents that do that for me. So, I think that's the beauty of it. And so same thing, there's times where I'm like, I think I'll make a video, and almost never do I regret, having put out, a piece of content or whatever, but it has to fit with everything else that's going on in your life. But I've talked with some people who I don't know the way to say it. They really get their feelings hurt about, not getting the subs and not getting shout outs from other, YouTubers or whatever. And the other thing I would say about that, and again, I know we're inside baseball at this point because we're talking about more than the wet shaving, but, I won that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 challenge I did, right? It got to some people like Nick Shaves, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe it. So then I decided, well, I'm going to ask Chris, IMCDB. I'm going to ask Ruds, who I've enjoyed his review videos for so long, because they're just no nonsense. And I asked Kevy Shaves, and it seems like maybe one more, and all of them agreed to do it. And I was like, I probably had, I don't know, at the time I did that, I may have had less than 300 subscribers, and they all did it. And I was like blown away. So if you want like a shout out, like come up with an idea and ask people if they're interested in doing it, and you'd be surprised. It's a really generous community.
I agree. Yeah.
It's like anything, there's cliques, there's, little groups of whatever, and they have their own little thing. But for the most part, like it's been, in the time we live in, when there's so much political divide and other, stuff going on in society, that's just shows the dark side of humanity, if you will. This hobby, not to overstate it, but I've just been blown away by the generosity. And that's another thing I would say to people. If you don't want to take the time to sell your stuff, just give it to somebody else, send it on to somebody, because, people will appreciate it. And, that's just it's one of the pleasant surprises is how supportive people are. And so yeah, it's just, there's people, like I said, I've only been doing this now, and I've only been doing the videos now for almost 2 years. And I have at least 10 people now that I would consider friends that weren't friends before, and
present company.
Yeah, exactly.
It was through a YouTube creators Facebook page that you kind of reached out to me. I had a question about like, what are you guys using? Because I use a DSLR and I use my phone, and I used a 2-camera shot because I didn't want to put like a camera directly in front of me. And you offered me some tips and whatnot, and it's like, it's the willingness for people to, and like you said, even the big names, like you mentioned, like Kevy Shaves and stuff like that. And what's also funny is that we look at them as these celebrities and these rock stars. Outside of wet shaving, they're nobody.
No, it blew my mind. So my co-host of the Take Care Men mental health podcast is Andy Wilmer, who's the opinionated Brit on YouTube. And so I was listening to his podcast, and I remember when I heard, of course, like Kevy Shaves does some voiceover work, but his day job is he's a postman. So when I learned that Kevy Shaves and Paul H were both postmen, it blew my mind. It was like, wait a minute, what? Both these guys, deliver mail. It was just something about that seemed serendipitous to me. But
John Prine was a postman, and he would get his ideas while walking around, and he would think up these poems and songs in his head, and then it led to him being a musician, but it's also funny that these guys, you hear people complain, the mail's running super slow, and it's like those two guys could weigh in, and they could be like, hey man, the mail takes some time. Or whatever.
It does. The dangerous thing about talking to you, Drew, is that like you're making me think we should start a music podcast, because our tastes are clearly the same. Man, did we lose a great one in John Prine.
And the music industry has this is going way off subject. You used to have to buy CDs and you have to buy records and you had to buy tapes and 8-tracks and whatnot. Now everything is just, I've got my phone here. I can stream any song that I want to hear. And so, you know, I mean, they used to always say, you know, like artists make all their money off of touring and the merchandise and stuff. And then it's the record labels that make the money off the sales. But like that, you know, I don't know if anything could ever change like that. The way like the music industry has changed, would something like that ever happen to wet shaving? Would it ever get to the point where, I don't know. That's
well, okay.
That's too much for me to think about.
No, if you think about, so, you know, because, you know, we're both old enough to remember Napster, when Napster was a thing, because that was kind of the first time where you had this peer-to-peer file sharing MP3 kind of thing. This was before Spotify or anybody, you know, and there was part of it that was, you know, it was, I think at the time technically illegal because you had these copyrighted, you know, music, but it was disruptive to the industry, you know, because people could get their hands on stuff and artists started to adopt it of like, oh, wait a minute, as long as ears are getting on my music, ultimately I win, you know, in the end. And so I think that artisans and also shavers can learn about that a little bit, because ultimately, you know, if you think about, you know, like IT, like we talk about hardware, software, we do the same thing. We talk about that as such in wet shaving. I think, you know, you can think about, well, it is, I mean, it is, you can almost think about shaving soaps as media, as releases. And we talk about them the same way, that they dropped and they have notes and all this stuff. So I think that when people start to share samples and go in together and split up a tub, it's disruptive in a good way, I think. Because to me, I have spent so much money on Sterling and PAA products, and it's primarily because they have samples. I think samples, if you want to be a successful artist, to me, is get your samples out there, because it makes the point of entry, you know, much lower for people. So I think rewarding, it's not the right word, but you know, doing business with artisans that, you know, make it easier to have, you know, little chunks of what they do, you know, because, you know, I'm, you know, old enough to remember the 8-tracks and most of the music I bought as a teenager and in college were on cassette tapes, but I still remember the joy of the 45, you know, of being able to go buy one song and, oh, you got a bonus one on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, because it was this partialized experience. So I think that, you know, people even like sharing, instead of having to buy 100 blades, you know, somebody sends you a pack of 5 you've never tried before, like that kind of thing. So I think we can be disruptive in that kind of way, in terms of like just trying to make it a hobby for the people. And I know I'm coming across here as a IMCDB fanboy, but I do like that. One of the things Chris does is he really tries to make the hobby accessible to more and more people. And I think that's what needs to be at the forefront of all our minds, is like, how do we make this something that's more accessible? And, you know, being a social worker by training, like I know what it means for people to really have limited incomes, right? Like I remember in this hobby, I was talking to a guy who basically is disabled, you know, and most, you know, not to get too deep in this, but like, so the Veterans Administration does a percentage of disability. They don't do fully disabled or not, which is interesting. But anyway, this guy's a disabled veteran, right? But he didn't get the disability he thought he would have. And he's on a very fixed, you know, income. And, you know, and so he found like the level of discussion about purchasing and stuff off-putting within the hobby, because because there is, there's the envy, and yes, there's the fear of missing out. But there's also a little bit of a snobbery that goes on, and I'll try not to be so crass, but it does occur to me sometimes that the purchasing of things basically becomes a, you know what, measuring contest among men, right? Like, you know, and so it's just like, stop it with that, you know. And so, you know, I think that can happen, is that you start somehow, you know, feeling like, oh, you got to be one of the in crowd and have this, that, or the other. Ultimately, you enjoying your shaving experience is what's important, and that has to be the overarching you know, thing that you think about is I don't know if you were in the shave group when Scott, who is known as the Peaceful Shaver, I was asking everybody to name a song to put on a playlist, but there's a Wet Shavers Spotify playlist. I don't know if you know this.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have to send it to you. And it's not, at first I thought it was shaving theme because I actually submitted a shaving theme song, but it was just all the Wet Shavers' favorite tunes. So I have to send you a Spotify link to that since you're both interested in music.
Yeah, I'm Facebook friends with him. I can't remember how exactly. Something he mentioned. I don't remember exactly how him and I got talking. He has a really funny video of him using the Clubman veg is it? I've never used
Lilac Vegetal.
The veg. Yeah. And it's him. He puts it on and he has his wife come in and then she smells it. And then first she smells it like in the bottle and she's like, that's disgusting. Yeah. And then he has her come in and a few minutes later, she's like, that's not bad, And it's just like,
For those of you who don't know, what's sometimes affectionately referred to as the veg, apparently to some people, it's kind of like the blue dress, gold dress kind of thing. Yeah. To some people, it smells like cat pee. When you smell it, apparently. And I've smelled it. It's not pleasant to me, but it doesn't necessarily smell like cat urine. But yeah, people either, and as they say in the community, you don't choose Lilac Vegetal, it chooses you. So like you have to be one of the chosen to enjoy the veg. But yeah, Scott's a great guy too. I've talked to him before. I think he's a mail carrier as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
But yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. But yeah, he's a great guy. But anyway, I have to send you that playlist.
Yeah. I always listen to music when I shave, and I've got a playlist that I listen to, and it's all like, I listen to like a lot of screamo, like metal. Right. But I definitely don't listen to that while I shave. I would cut myself or whatever. I would start a drum solo. And
so there's two guys, Shaving with Surge. I don't know if you've seen his channel, but he usually has some pretty heavy metal, usually going in the background. Yeah. And then there's another guy, and I can't remember his channel's name, but it's Ken is his name. And he usually has metal like playing during his shave or whatever. But yeah, if I could flex, so I have a guitar and I know, how to pick around on it. I do a little flat picking, but mostly chords, but I at least come from a very musically rich part of the country. And it's not, since I'm originally from Northwest Alabama, specifically the Muscle Shoals area. So most people who know anything about, music have heard of Muscle Shoals before. And it's kind of still a place that artists like to come and record. So yeah, I've grown up around great music and been in a great area. And so, living in Jackson, Tennessee, home of rockabilly, I drove my daughter's hugely into the Beatles right now. So, and when she found out that Carl Perkins and like George Harrison and the Beatles were like great friends and they visited him. And so I took her by Carl Perkins, old house the other day, and she freaked out to know that, that the Fab Four had been in those walls before.
That's funny. Yeah. My mom has an unopened, still in the shrink wrap copy of the LP Abbey Road.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know what it's worth, probably at least a couple of $100. So
I'm sure
came out like a week before her birthday. I mean, she was a teenager. Wow. She was like all the other, Beatles fanatics. So she bought it like right, the day it came out or whatever. And then like a week later, she had her 13th birthday, however old she was, and a friend gave it to her. Well, you would wear out a record if you played it enough. So she kept it. She, instead of giving it to somebody else, she thought, I'm probably going to wear out this album. So I'll keep a backup. Well, I don't know if she ever wore it out or not, but it got stuck in a closet and it got forgotten about for how's long, 50 years. And about 5 or 10 years ago, we were cleaning out that closet and we found it. And we were like, oh my God, an unopened copy of Abbey Road, like first production of it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something, analogous to that in the shaving community, and it's okay. You're talking about British Sterling. Like you can go on eBay and find vintage bottles of British Sterling, and, but yeah, I remember when I bought like a new release because my dad did use, when I was a kid, he used English leather aftershave, and I bought like a newer bottle of English leather and I was like, oh my gosh, no, this is not it. It's not what it is. The fascinating thing that both my dad and granddad had that I've wanted to purchase, but they make them more expensively, but they had them for cans of Barbasol, the ones they had. Right. You insert it was this machine, if you've seen this, but you put the can of Barbasol in there and plug it into an outlet, it would warm your Barbasol for you. So you have heated they both had one of those. I think one of them got them and the other one bought it for a gift or whatever. Yeah. It was kind of a cool thing.
All that weird novelty stuff. Talking about Willie Nelson, I actually met Willie Nelson once. I got to go on his tour bus and everything. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nicest guy in the whole world. Like, I've met a couple of celebrities that aren't really the nicest people, but Willie Nelson was such a cool dude. Like, I tell everybody that when it comes up in conversation that he was the nicest guy. It's like meeting an old friend. It was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, how could he be otherwise? I mean, he just seems like the real deal,
Right. Right.
I missed him when he came here to Jackson, but apparently, he's getting on up there in age, and like it was at a minor league ballpark, and they actually drove him in a golf cart from the tour bus pulled on like into the outfield. Yeah. And they drove him in a golf cart, up to like near the pitcher's mound where the stage was or whatever. But yeah, he's one person I have never seen in concert that I would love to.
You got to go because you don't know how much longer. I missed John Prine. I mentioned John Prine. He was playing about 2 hours away, and the tickets were a little pricey. And I just was like, and I didn't do it. And then he died last year, and so I'll never get to see him again. And it's like I regret not going to see John Prine. And so,
if you're listening to this to us, and you are not familiar with the work of one John Prine, please Google John Prine, and you can thank us later. What a songwriter, and another guy who seems just like salt of the earth, good dude. Yeah, he's great. There's Texas, huge scene out there. You have some adopted. I mean, I know you're not there now, but you have some adopted people too, like Jerry Jeff Walker, who died last year. Who
I did see him once. Saw him live once.
And I'm really into this guy named Todd. Well, now I'm going blank on his last name because I just think of him as Todd all the time.
It's not Todd Snyder, is it?
Todd Snyder, yeah, Todd Snyder. Yeah, I mean, he's got. Sometimes you should. You don't want to do it. And
I'm a huge Todd Snyder. I actually met Todd Snyder. So
please tell me he's
playing in Little Rock.
No,
it's super nice, nicest guy in the whole world. So I was living in Little Rock, and I used to work in TV news. And when I moved to Wisconsin, I worked in TV news as well. But he's my favorite singer. I've probably seen him 20 times live. And he was playing in Little Rock, and I contacted his media person, and I used my media influence and basically finagled an interview with him. And so went on his tour bus and got to hang out with him I was probably there for an hour or so talking with him. Nicest guy in the world. They always tell you don't meet your hero. I would say Todd Snyder is my hero. I got real big into him in college, and then still a huge fan. My wife and she had never heard of him until she met me, and we went and saw him a couple of years ago here in Wisconsin. And she was like, yeah, I can see why you like that guy. But yeah, super nice guy.
Yeah, like there's some people where I don't know why they're like, there's some people I don't know why they're not bigger than they are, and he's one of them. Yeah, he's
definitely he was super high. I'll tell you that.
I'm not sure he's ever not high. I think
it was Willie Nelson. I'm sure at least with Willie Nelson it was a little bit more I couldn't tell or but I'll just cut to the chase. Todd had a lot of weed out on his table, like, whereas Willie did not. But yeah, meeting Todd was super cool, super nice. We sat and watched baseball. It was the World Series. It was the Giants and somebody, and he's a big baseball fan. He grew up out west, and I think he might be a Giants fan. I don't know exactly, but I do know I was watching the World Series. It was October, and we're sitting in his tour bus, and he's got a little television up in the corner, and we were watching the World Series. And so meeting Todd Snyder was super
cool memory. Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice. I've got a picture of it somewhere. I'll throw it in. If I find it, I'll throw it in here.
I'm sure you've seen it. He's told it in a couple of concerts, but he tells this whole story about like the first time he met Jerry Jeff Walker, and then all the way to like when he went with Jerry Jeff down to wherever Belize and went scuba diving. And then he closes out the story with this really great story of running into a guy playing Mr. Bojangles in the middle of the night in, I think, New Orleans or whatever. But yeah, that guy's, there's not that many people that know about Todd Snyder, but it's another one. He's got some great music.
And yeah, same thing. You're kind of like, he's so good. Like, why does he not have such a super huge following, But,
and probably because he's stoned half the time. That's probably the answer.
Yeah, that's probably, I think he's cool with it.
He does these Sunday live streams. Now on YouTube.
I watch a lot of those.
From East Nashville. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have the same musical taste. Pretty scary. Yeah.
Hey, screamo metal. You listen to?
That's one genre I can't go. I just can't go there. Like
I have a good friend. He listened to a band once, and he was like, "That sounds like the devil," because it's like they use the death growl and whatnot. And I don't know why I got into metal. Well, I do. When I was like in the 7th or 8th grade, a dude down the street, an older kid, introduced me to Metallica, and I heard the song "One" by Metallica, and then that was it for me. And it's kind of like with drugs or with shaving gear. I'm always trying to attain a higher level of metal, like faster, louder, more screamo. Like I listen to a lot of like hardcore satanic death metal, and I'm also just a dad that lives in the Midwest. I'm the geekiest guy that there is.
I can't
screamo metal.
I can't do the death metal, and I can't do modern country, which is
don't get me started on that. Oh
gosh. Like if, and I'm sure they're great guys, but if like Florida Georgia Line disappeared, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite Wikipedia articles, we're getting way off the rails here, but if the Wikipedia article on metal, genres of metal is fascinating. Like I can't, it's unbelievable how many different genres of, subgenres of metal there
are. The weirdest one for me is called math core. Like math and core. Okay. Like core is obviously like hardcore. So you've got grind core. Grind core is kind of just grunting, like the singer's grunting. Math core is this really weird melodic, like I said, I can go pretty deep into when I talk to people and I run into them and I tell them that I'm big into metal, and then I tell them how big into metal that I am. They're always kind of shocked, like, whoa, that's weird. Like, math core. You should look that up. Look up math core.
I can handle a lot of like, like I love Metallica. Maybe what's not like a Metallica, but yeah, some of the ones where like it's just like I'm really scared. Like I'm scared. Like when I hear it, I'm like, if something bad's about to happen to me, like I don't know what it, like those scare me a little bit. But
they're all just normal people. Yeah, like Alice Cooper. Yeah. Remember when Alice Cooper hit the scene? Like he was the devil. He scared people, and now he plays golf in Arizona and he hosts a nightly radio.
Seems like he's just the sweetest guy. Dude. Yeah.
Marilyn Manson, everyone acted like he's the devil. I guarantee. I mean, he's a little weird. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But Todd Snyder has a great song, kind of that starts about Marilyn Manson. But a lot of it is just I guarantee he sits around in his underwear and eats cereal and watches cartoon. He's a regular person. It's all a persona, and you could almost say that about a lot of these people on Wet Shavers.
Oh yeah.
Like they may only actually have one or two soaps. They take their one picture of it and then they send it off, and then you think that they've got hundreds of soaps and maybe they don't. You think that they have all these razors. Maybe they only have a couple, and you don't know that. And it's that not knowing that can trick you into making bad decisions.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, so I'm a huge fan, not so much anymore of the actual product, but behind the scenes. So I grew up, having grown up in the South, I spent a lot of time in Mississippi with my grandparents, and I grew up on Memphis wrestling, right? Okay. So I love the whole concept of professional wrestling. Like I like the behind the scenes, like the faces and the heels and all that, right?
Right.
And they have a saying there, like if they're doing something that's actually real life, like there's real heat between people, they call that a shoot, right? But if it's something that's part of the storyline that they're, then they call it a work. And I got to thinking, I wonder how we as like wet shaving content creators could create like some sort of like almost carnival level like drama that doesn't really exist, you know what I'm saying? Like just for kicks and giggles. But yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm sure there's probably somebody that's photoshopped their shave of the day photo with another label or something, but it's crazy. And there is times where I've watched within groups people get in heated discussions about stuff, and and then usually somebody will go, dudes, like we're talking about shaving, like just stop it, like what, don't stop taking yourself so serious. But some people, man, and that's what I found. Like I tried a few times to get on Reddit and on Badger and Blade and have conversations with people on there, and apparently I just can't. So I stick to Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And I'm telling you, man, it's blown me away, like to just people who've reached out to me through YouTube, it's so weird because there was one soap, and you'll appreciate this because we're mentioning some of the same things, but there was one soap I used that I'd gotten a sample from Ken, and I'd never heard anybody describe the scent before. But anyway, when I smelled it, it instantly transported me to like shopping malls in the 80s, where there was like a caramel corn place, and like they used to have these like iron-on t-shirts. Like you could go and there's like all the designs. You'd pick out your shirt, they'd make you a t-shirt.
Yeah,
It had this. It had like the printing, like the smell of like the pressing the shirts and like a caramel corn place, like in the shopping mall, and like whatever like air freshener they use here. And that's what I said in the video. I was like, this smells like the malls I went to in the 80s, and I showed up. And lo and behold, that's exactly what Ken Shave 326 wife said. She's like, this is like the shopping mall from the 80s. So it's funny, like that, where you feel like you make these connections, like, oh, somebody's brain works like mine does.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's there's some great people in the hobby, and that's the thing. If I would say to somebody too, like if they're dealing with the envy thing, rather than dropping the money, go into one of the things and say, hey, I'm really interested in such and such scent, but I don't want to commit to a full tub. I guarantee you within a day, somebody's going to say, hey, send me your address. I'll send you a sample. Yep. They will. I sure
awesome.
will.
Well, hey man, it was good talking to you.
We're going to have to do another. Yeah. We're going to have to do another one. Yeah.
For sure. Awesome.
So yeah, we can talk about off episode, but yeah, I've got some other ideas we can talk about in the future.
Cool. All right, man. Thanks.
That's great, Drew. Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally.